Welcome to the second Sunday of Lent and the second Sunday of our message series, Rebuilt Faith. If you are just joining us today, we are so glad that you're here. Let me take a few moments to bring you up to speed about what we've been talking about. We're basing this series off of a new book called just that, Rebuilt Faith, a handbook for skeptical Catholics. If you were with us last week, we gave out 300 copies of the book, which was all we had purchased, so if you didn't get one, I'm sorry we ran out. But I think it's worth reading, so if you didn't get one, I'd encourage you to order one online. We think that the 10 minutes a day that it takes to read is the perfect complement to your Lenten observance. Our goal in this series is to help you refresh, renew, and rebuild your faith. Living out your faith is called discipleship. And discipleship is about following Jesus, living as Jesus wants you to live, all in the context of your own unique circumstances. Discipleship is a journey. It's a journey that starts here, but ends in heaven. So then, as long as you are alive, you will always have a next step. And STEP is also an acronym for some of the things that lie along our discipleship path. S stands for serve, T stands for tithe or give, E is for engage, as in engage in a Christian community, P is for practice, as in practice prayer and sacraments, and the final S is for share, because we're not meant to simply keep our faith to ourselves. Now, you'll notice these aren't things that are just once and done, but rather they are things that you can continually go deeper in. Today we are going to talk about the first S, which is serve. During college, one of my summer jobs was working for the Buildings and Grounds Department of the town of Carver. Mostly I mowed lawns and I cleaned bathrooms. I remember my first day on the job, I met with the superintendent and he was showing me around. And at one point we walked from the garage where the equipment was back to the town hall along a walkway. And as we walked down the walkway, someone had thrown a coffee cup on the lawn. Now, until this point, that coffee cup is something that I never would have even taken notice of, much less thought to pick it up. But the superintendent noticed the coffee cup. He bent over, he picked it up, and as we got to the door, he threw it in the trash can. And then as he was opening the door, he paused. He looked back at me, and he said, "Gerald, we always notice those things, and then we do something about it." You know, that was a very important lesson for me because I took away from that two things. First, part of serving means that we should never think that any sort of service is beneath us. And second, we need to take notice. I need to take notice of the things that I can do and then take that next step of actually doing something about it. Growing in discipleship means growing in your spirit of service. We learn as kids through the chores sometimes that we have to help out with things around the house. And I think it's a sign of growing maturity and love when we can come to do our chores without having to be prompted or asked. You know, but of course, these are things that we always have to grow in. You know, for instance, there was once a man and he said to his priest, he said, "Father, how do I get my wife to stop nagging me?" And then the priest replied, "Well, just do what she says the first time." Serving always costs something, be it time, effort, energy, or money. But it's always worth it. It's always worth it because when we serve, we make life better for others, and in the process, we become less focused on ourselves. And that makes us more pleasant to be around, and that in turn strengthens all of our relationships. Serving others both proves and grows our love by taking the focus off of me and turning it to the other. And that's really the definition of love: to desire and do what is good for the other. We don't serve simply for that good feeling that we may or may not get. We serve because it makes us more like Jesus. And if our service is prompted by the love of God, well, then we know that we've really arrived. Our gospel today showed us the scene of the Transfiguration. The Transfiguration scene began by Jesus taking some of his disciples, Peter, James, and John, up the mountain, and then the scene ends with them coming back down the mountain. The Transfiguration marks a turning point in the ministry of Jesus, because after they come down from the mountain, they now start heading to Jerusalem, where Jesus is going to offer his life for you and for me on the cross, which is the ultimate act of self-sacrificing service. So they're there on the mountain. And then for a few brief moments, the veil that hid the majesty of Jesus' divinity is pulled back. And we read, "And he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, such as no fuller on earth could bleach them." Again, this just lasted a little bit. But it makes me think of those, brief, precious moments that God gives us from time to time when maybe we experience clarity around our life's purpose, or we have a really clear sense of God's plan or his loving presence in our life. It's in these brief periods where we feel peace and joy that God is strengthening us to serve when it's hard. Like when you feel tired or frustrated or underappreciated. Like when you have to deal with a family member that has dementia, a child that is going through a difficult stretch, or just simply doing something that you don't want to do, but something that you know you have to do. St. Bede, when he commented on this passage, said that the Lord, through a loving concession, gave them this brief taste of the joy that would be eternally theirs in heaven, so that they could be strengthened to face adversity with greater fortitude. And as we'll know, each of the apostles would have to suffer in their own ways. The scene ends when Peter, James, and John are covered with the cloud. And then from the cloud, they hear the voice of the Father, who says, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." Listening to Jesus is hard. And time and again, Jesus has to remind the disciples and us of things he's already told them. In fact, after they got down the mountain, they start heading to Capernaum. And as they're on the way, the disciples start arguing amongst themselves about who is the greatest. So then Jesus again has to teach them about how service is a demand of discipleship. He'll say to them, "If anyone wishes to be first, he shall be the last of all and the servant of all." And then a little while later, he has to remind the disciples again, "Whoever wishes to be great among you will be your servant. Whoever wishes to be first among you will be the slave of all. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Commenting on passages like these, Cardinal Sean often says, "The disciples often fight over the seats of honor, but what Jesus really wants them to do is fight over who gets to do the dishes." Imagine what our country, our world, our parish, our community, your family would be like if we were all growing in this attitude of service. We get so many opportunities to serve in so many different places. Sometimes it might be the big exceptional things, but those are really rare. Usually the ways and the places that we are called to serve are the small, ordinary, regular things that come as a part of our regular tasks and responsibilities. And we serve there by doing them extraordinarily well. That is, with love. And when we love and serve like this, we create a more family environment wherever we are. Let me end by inviting you to make a mindset shift. Don't think that you have to serve. Think that you get to serve. Don't think that you have to serve. Think that you get to serve. Because serving is a privilege that we have as God's sons and daughters. So let me end with a question for us to take to our prayer this week. Where can you better serve? In our parish, in your family, or anywhere else?